Hello, my name is Aimee Petrin. I'm the executive and artistic director at Portland Ovations, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by an incredible artist, friend, collaborator, partner, Daniel Bernard Roumain. Daniel is a composer. He is a musician, violinist, particularly. He is an artivist, I think is a word we've coined over the years.
I think so.
He's a community organizer. He is involved in projects that are diverse in their artistic endeavors across the country. He has worked as music directors in dance as well. So he is coming at it from every single direction. But I think the most important thing that I know about Daniel is the way that he brings people together. So we are embarking on a new project, Daniel.
Yes, and thank you for having me and for talking with me and for believing in me and investing in me and presenting me.
Well, this has been a relationship that has gone, we're heading into 2 decades. I know neither of us look
Oof.
old enough to say that,
Well, I
but,
started when we were 2 years old, so it's all
and I
good.
was like 3 or 4, so we're good.
Exactly.
And I just to give folks a sense of that relationship over time, I think the first time that you visited Portland was, I believe, like 2008, 2009,
Wow.
way back then. And at that
Wow.
time, you came with a project called a Civil Rights Reader, in
Yeah.
which you had created a series of sonic portraits
Mm.
for the great civil rights leaders of our time. And we did 2 concerts plus lots of community activities. And it was one of the first school time performances we did. It was
Wow.
also as an organization that has a 90 now 3-year history of presenting classical music, presenting different classical music, music that
Yeah.
was composed in this time, not by folks from Western Europe. And I'll just flash back to that moment because one of my favorite moments of that was we had children who came, as I said, to the school time, and they actually came back that evening and they brought their parents.
Mm. Yeah, that's a big deal. Mom and dad. Well,
Mhm.
Zach was born in 2009, and I remember driving, literally between Portland and where I am right now, Norwood, Massachusetts. It's about 2 hours, a little bit less. Um, so that journey and this journey, they're kind of intertwined, you know. Up until that moment, I had given hundreds of workshops and worked with, wow, thousands of children, but I didn't have my own. And he was coming or just arriving. Um, but I do remember the kind of weight of it all that uh, when you're speaking with young people in a community that you're not living in, there's a particular responsibility, at least for me, and then you're adding race, and then you're adding, um, well, you know, my own uh, my own anxiety as a as a as a forthcoming father at the time, not knowing who Zachary was going to be, and, my relationship with his mother, which was good then and even better now, quite frankly. But all of these things to say that I think that when I was growing up, there was a teacher who would always say, you know, uh, life doesn't get better. Life doesn't even know who you are, something
Mhm.
like that. And I understand what she meant. She meant really well. She would follow that up with, "Are you prepared for life?" Right, in terms of your education, in terms of your choices. And I kind of knew then, but I know now that really the arts and having a good appetite and healthy relationship with the arts has always been fulfilling and prepared me for becoming a father. Quite frankly, I didn't know it, but I think that's one of the things that, particularly now, as you and I, as parents and as people who are responsible in some ways for the cultural choices that other parents and children will make, which is really what you're getting at. Um, um, I'm reminded. I am really reminded that if you want to really be a part of a civil society, a humane society, a society that can share what I call a shared radical morality. If you want to be a part of that, whether you're an artist or a parent or a member of the Portland community, in the community or online, then that's one way to do it. And you can buy a ticket and have a say and be a vital and important part of the cultural choices that need to be made and need to go forward and be supported and upheld.
Mhm. And I'll fast forward on that. So that first time set up the beginnings of again those 2 decades. I think, and it's funny because a lot of it swirls together. I don't remember when you were, here versus there because I feel like you've always been there. But we also had a great experience with Enmas, in which you led over 100 area musicians and artists, from those who were probably about 6 years old to those who were well over 60 years old, in a parade down Congress Street, closed the street, with thousands of people walking in the streets in the name of music, in the name of art, in the name of community.
Yeah.
You also visited North Yarmouth Academy and 317 Maine and the Maine Acoustic Music Festival. That was a very potent moment. Again, getting back to that connection with young people and their relationship to their art and what they will do with their art as they move forward in life. And then during lockdown, when we all didn't know what to do, we invited you to come back to Portland and perform on the back of a flatbed truck. And we moved all around Portland. We were wearing masks outside because we didn't know.
We didn't know.
But I remember standing there in the audience, and more than once people said, "This is the first time I've heard live music in over 6 months. Thank you." And it was another, and I just got goosebumps. It was another one of those reminders of the importance of art as a place to gather, hopefully a place to safely gather, but really gather. And I think the other thing that comes to mind when I think about working with you, in addition to the trust, is that sense of being present. And I think about that a lot with the work we do. Sometimes people talk about art's our greatest form of escapism. And to me, art is the time to be my most present self, with myself, with the person sitting next to me, with the person on stage. And I bring that up also because I feel like your work is about being present. And that brings us to where we are today with Echoes, which is honoring Black life in Portland, past, present, and future. And that act of being present comes to play because one of the most beautiful ways that you work is what we call site responsive. So can you talk a little bit about what site responsive work means in the context of being present and in the context of Echoes?
Well, years ago, I started playing in places of trauma. I would literally go to a site where a shooting had happened or something kind of terrible and horrible had happened in the space, some sort of massacre. Tulsa, Oklahoma comes to mind. I mean, a lot of my work is in many ways site responsive, in that I'm being invited into a place of trauma, and me and a team of collaborators or creators are in some ways trying to not only remember what happened and honor those ancestors and memorialize a healing process, if you will, but you're doing many things at once in the creation of work there. So, for example, I was invited to create an opera called "We Shall Not Be Moved," which was a response to the horrific event of the MOVE organization in 1985 in the city of Philadelphia. And that was done with the great Mark Joseph and the great Bill T. Jones. But I've also started doing smaller scale works where it's me and my violin, and I go to a space and I see that space. And for me, any space, any home, just about any place of gathering has an energy to it that's very palpable, very real to me, and very musical. And site responsive work to me is something I guess I've kind of gotten a little better at over the years, because I feel that I'm I'm able to empathize in a different way, in some ways because of the pandemic and because we weren't allowed to leave our homes, quite frankly. Um, in this instance, I was invited specifically to the Abyssinian meeting house, or the meeting house. And, the first time I was there, even on the outside, there was so much energy. It's a place, I think, of both trauma and triumph, of suffering and success. That's so much of the Black American experience, I think. And once I stepped inside of the house, and I think the first time I might have been with my son, or maybe it was the second time, which was also, I'm just realizing that now, that journey. Um, there is an energy in the house, and there certainly is a kind of magic to the architecture, the nails, those planks of wood, how everything comes together. Some of the original woodworking meeting a renovation. Um, these things come together in a way that are, for me, just absolutely kind of it occupies the space between the most brutal and the most beautiful, those intersecting lines, as much as it's a score in my mind. So I'm able to create music and play the violin, and in this case, actually create a melody, what we call the echoes theme, which holds these things and attempts to give reason and understanding and actually an invitation to what I would call the ancestors of that space, but also the citizens of Portland, that we can all continue to come together to meet and find common ground. And that's what the music is doing, and that's what I'm trying to do in what I call my wood box, my violin.
Well, and I think about when we've talked about Portland, and I remember at one point you talked about it as a port, it as a place of entry, it as a place of welcoming, and clearly the Abyssinian represents that so largely in the Black community here. And I remember when I first shared with you a picture of it, we were in New York, and I was like on my phone, I'm like, this is this building I need you to know about, and
Oh my goodness,
you
right.
lit up literally, and then talked about how the building like lit you up. And I remember that day when we were in there with the friends, the Abyssinian and your son, and that magic. And as a point of inspiration, let's talk a little bit too. We have some other partners in this project, Indigo Arts
Yeah.
Alliance.
Yeah.
And I think about going again back to 2008 and 2009. You and Daniel Minter did a talk together about
We
arts
did.
and activism at that point. When you
We
came
did.
back, Marcia Minter was on our board at that time when you came back for En Masse. And then when you came back and did the truck tour, one of the sites was in the proximity of Indigo and their place on Cove Street. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how this work resonates in the space of partnerships. How do we think about all these pieces? Because there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces. I'm hyper collaborative by nature, and I think that as I see it, uh, the Abyssinian Meeting House, Indigo Arts Alliance, and all of the artists that occupy these spaces, we are collaborating. Many of the artists that work with Indigo Arts Alliance are part of, now I would call, the Abyssinian Meeting House family, right? We find common ground in, let's say, the words of Moon Mashar, who is a brilliant Portland-based spoken word artist, who has written her own response in a beautiful poem on how she sees the meeting house. And I think there are other artists who are doing work that speaks to the mission, I think, of Indigo Arts Alliance and the Meeting House, the Abyssinian Meeting House. Just behind it is an African American burial ground, which I took a tour of and was able to walk and honor the thousands that I've been told, the thousands of souls that are there, kind of part of the earth, part of the ground, and that in a way is a backdrop, kind of geographically, to the meeting house itself. Um, and those tombstones, some of which are just a kind of rock shard, yeah, in the ground. There's people there, and I'm always thinking about that because I think that it's a reminder that conversation and collaboration is so necessary. Because I think my father talked a lot about the astral body. When I was 5 years old, we started having these conversations, and he was so clear that he was talking to me, not that I was 5 years old, that maybe I was 15 or 25. I remember that. And he would talk about, Danny, the one place where I'm not black, the one place where I'm not restricted, or where I am in defiance of gravity, is in my astral body, that I can travel anywhere and do anything and be anyone and have all answers. He would kind of talk in almost a mystical, magical way. It made a big impression on me. He died April 22nd, 2013 at 1:07 p.m. And I think to myself, if what he thought actually came true, if he's in flight, if he's having conversations and collaborations now with all of their ancestors and people that he dreamed of, that he wanted to, So for me, as a Black American, as a Black Haitian American artist, I feel a particular debt, a particular responsibility to carry on these conversations, to kind of force peace, right? To kind of manifest community, no matter where I go. I mean, Portland's just a place. It's the people there that I know I have something in common with. And I'm actually a very shy person. So for me, playing the violin with someone, underscoring what they're saying, which is so much of what I do fundamentally, my music is a canvas that allows other ideas to be framed and held. I always say I'm a farmer and a framer of ideas, right? That's the agronomist to me. But Haitian people have always had a relationship with the sea, with a port of call. And I think at its best, a port was a place that Black people came in ultimately to die and suffer in America for generations, for years. There's another way to look at that a port is an opportunity for travel and for journey, for investigation, for diaspora. And that's true too. Water takes life away, but we are born of water, and it gives life. These are things Haitian fishermen talk about, right? But you can see the relationship I'm making with how that meeting house is very close to a port of call, right? A place where life ended, but also was born. And I think that we have a choice. And I think the choice is what stories are being told, who is telling them, and where will they take place? What stories are being told, who is telling them, and where do they take place? And I've got to say, this isn't, I'm sorry to talk a little bit out of turn and a little too long, but I think that Portland Ovations, even in its name, is doing many things at once. It is a call to rise. It is a specific place, and it's a place where you have to make a choice to stand up, to be seen and heard, and to hear. And I'm so excited that, Indigo Arts Alliance, the Abyssinian Meeting House, and Portland Ovations have made a choice to decide which stories are being told, particularly as far as Black people in Portland, who is telling them. Well, I'm one of the lead artists, but there are many others, Portland bound. And where are these stories taking place? Principally at Indigo Arts Alliance, at the African American Burial Ground, and in front of the Meeting House. You put those things together, that is a wonderful mix. That's what the Baptist might say. These are the things that feed our souls.
There are so many things that you just said that read that I can't even
Yes.
begin. First of all, thank you for reimagining our name because you
Yeah.
just gave me a whole new way to think about things,
Oh,
which again, goosebumps because this is
yeah.
why I want art in my life and why
Mm,
I want artists in my life, most importantly, is the human beings with these creative thinking in these moments. So thank you for that. I want to connect a couple more dots of things that you said just for context. Moon Machar, you mentioned
yeah.
the amazing poet that we have here in Maine. And again, connecting some dots, we did a project many years ago in
Mm.
collaboration with our friends at Indigo. Actually, I think it was even before Indigo was Indigo, where we
Oh,
did
wow.
a walk of the Freedom Trail here in Portland, and we had different sites that were interpreted, if you will. And that was the first time we met Moon. She was a stop on our along the
Mm.
way, or the first time we worked with Moon. And then later, we invited Moon to be part of the flatbed truck tour with you. So you
Hmm.
got to work with Moon.
That's right.
Moon is now on our board. And so
Amazing.
I just love the layers of relationships and connections that happen because again,
Mm.
all of these things happen because of making art and because of coming together. And to your point, for standing up with and next to each other in these moments of telling stories, sharing truth,
That's right.
sharing the good and the bad.
Mm.
I also makes me think about when you mentioned the East End Burial Ground and the Prince Project, which are the folks that are hosting the tours of the cemetery that will share the stories of some of the folks who were buried there. Um, what I think is really, again, powerful about Echoes is we are really looking at past, present, and future, and none of those things are singular. Like
Mm.
it's one thing to talk about the cemetery as the past, but it isn't the past because those spirits are still alive, to use
Yeah.
the language of our partners. Indigo is everything about the here and now. They are so
Mm.
present and forward looking. And then we have our friends with the Abyssinian who are holding both the past and the future. So I just think about how that layering of time also plays into the work. And the last
Yeah.
thing I'll say that just really resonated,
Mm.
you mentioned water. And when we first conceived of this concept, seeking resonance, which is an overarching umbrella we use to talk about a number of different programs that often have a social or racial platform,
Yeah.
it was a conversation with Daniel Minter 15 years ago, where we talked about seeking resonance in water and how water was such an important piece of this. And he created some art
Yeah.
at that time that really was based in water and the idea of
Mm.
vessels, right? Like these are like that day, the day of Echoes is his
Mm.
own vessel of
Yeah.
holding the art, holding the stories, holding the souls, living and non, holding each other. I think that was
Mm.
another thing that you wrote at one point that I thought was so poignant was you talked about Echoes being as a place and space to hold these stories, but also to hold each other. And I
Ooh,
think that
yeah.
you wrote that.
I
Uh,
said that, really?
yeah,
Okay, I forget.
you
I'm
did.
old. I'm getting old, Amy.
As we both are. But I think that that's really, I think again, going back to why we do this work is
Yeah.
it's the humanity. It's about
Yes.
being in community, whether it's
Yes.
one or not one, but two, three, 300, 2,000. It's
Yeah.
about being in community.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about the different artists? So Mumachar, obviously poet. You also have another couple of collaborators to talk about.
Yes. Well, Brian J. Evans, who is co-directing this with me, is a wonderful Portland-based, um, wow, I would say writers, spoken word artists, mover. I would say dancer, certainly choreographer. Um, in some ways, a visual artist for sure. Brian and I have already had some very detailed conversations on what we're calling our script, not the script, but our script.
Our script says the chief improviser executive.
Right, that's right. And, our script, without giving too much away, is a series of events that will be brilliantly sewn together that form a complex sequence of events that's going to hold many things at once: words, music, dance, lighting, sound, pre-recorded sound, um, sound design, I should say. You know, um, so I'm very excited by Moon, Brian, and our collaborations, and there are many more artists from Indigo, what I'm calling Indigo artists, meaning they have had time or relationship or a residence at Indigo Arts Alliance, who will be joining us as part of the day without giving too much away. Possibly also some surprise guest artists from 317 as well. There were a few. I don't use the word student. I use the word contributors. There were a few contributors there that, quite frankly, well, the reason I use contributors is that I don't believe in the word teacher or student as they have a context, right, and they have a history. I do believe that contributors, allows for all of us to contribute to a place, a space, a community, a world of ideas. That I can teach or say something, but I can also learn something from someone. It doesn't matter if they're 5 or 95 years old. Right? That's my own kind of teaching philosophy in a nutshell. And also, lest we forget, the audience will have a role to play beyond mere spectator sport, I suppose, or just watching or witnessing. Sorry, not spectator sport, but beyond the role of witness to the day, because the day is a wonderful sequencing and unfolding of events. Beyond that, the audience, well, in my work, oftentimes has a role to play. I'm from the school of call and response, and sometimes those things can be simple. Sometimes those things can be much more complex, depending on what the call is, and obviously the response. So I'm excited by that. I'm excited by how the day is going to unfold, and how, in some ways, what happens in front of the meeting house is one part of an equitable offering of events that will happen all over Portland. Really, it's a walkable tour of culture, of cultural offerings. It's a walkable tour of cultural offerings, steeped in and loyal to this notion of a kind of community-based, empathetic response. We talked about site responsive, which I love. I'm not sure exactly that's how you said it. Is that how you said it? Site responsive. Yeah, but I'm really thinking about today. Today worldwide there are protests. Today worldwide, young people, as they often have, are letting you know exactly how they feel about not only their communities, but other communities that are suffering. And without naming specifics, what I just said was applicable 30 years ago, 300 years ago. It will be applicable 30 years from now, 300 years from now, right? That the youth, and by the way, that I'm talking about a notion. I'm not talking about one's biological age. Again, you could be 5 or 95 years old and have this spirit of activism or proclamation or ovation, right? But this notion of how a community decides how they feel about something, and not a politician or a pundit or, quite frankly, an artist, that a community decides, I take a lot of reassurance in that, because those decisions often manifest in artistic ways. You can see a protest as something that is unruly, maybe even uniquely American or un-American, depends on your point of view. But you can also see the act of standing up for yourself or someone else or an idea as ultimately an artistic act, something visual, vulnerable, vital, and necessary.
And live, right?
And alive.
That is it. It is
that is it. I love that. And so I think that, sorry, I'm so strayed from this notion of collaboration, but to say that, sometimes we artists, we're on a stage, we get the lights, we get it all, and there are so many. We get all the acclamation, we get all the attention. There are so many people behind the stage. There are so many people on a staff, on a part of a technical department. There are so many people involved in making the work of artists real, and which is why I always try to find a moment in my collaborations with other artists to really bring the audience in, literally into the work, right? So they're going to have a role to play, and I'm excited by how the artists, particularly in Portland, well, as you were saying, whether it's marching down the street or going into schools or being a part of these the unique geography of Portland. I think that I'm a community artist more than just community based.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I know for those of you watching, we are in the midst of echoes right now. So as folks see this, it'll likely be after it has occurred. So this is a really wonderful way to echo that happening, and for people to dig back in and say, okay, I want to re-engage with this project. I want to know more about what was in Daniel's head when he was out there creating space for everybody to participate. And as you said, it's not just about the artists and not just the partners, but also those of us in the audience and in the community. It's our time to show up. I think that's the other thing about Ovations is it's not a passive relationship as an audience. As an audience, it has to show up and also stand up. So I love how you frame that. I'm going to take a minute to say some thank yous because
Of course.
none of this would be possible. And especially when we have a free community project that spanned the better part of a year, this doesn't happen without incredible support. So forgive me as I read because I don't want to miss anybody, but
Important.
I just want to call out and shout out to the New England Foundation for the Arts, the Onion Foundation, Center for Cultural Exchange, the Alice Ditson Fund of Columbia University, and the Robert and Dorothy Goldberg Foundation. Because of all those folks and because of the Ovations members who support us day after day, all year long, we were able to bring you back to Portland and be in partnership, be in community. And thank you, my friend. I can't wait till the next one.
Can't wait till the next one. Thank you.